All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of Polish academics.
Sounds fascinating.
It is. I think you'll really enjoy this one.
Yeah.
You sent over this study that was funded by the Polish Ministry of Science and Higher Education.
Yeah.
And they surveyed over 11,000 academics.
That's impressive.
It is. And they even went so far as to pull their Scopus data to get like a really in-depth look.
Oh, wow.
And what we're looking at here is their salary expectations.
Okay.
We're going to see how those expectations differ between genders, fields of study, career stage, all that good stuff.
I'm interested to see what they found.
Yeah, me too. And one of the things I found really interesting about this study is that it goes beyond just like presenting the numbers, you know.
Right.
It uses what's called a logistic regression model
Oh, that's cool.
to analyze all this data.
Yeah. I'm not super familiar with that. Could you maybe explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so basically you can think of it like a really powerful magnifying glass. It helps researchers see which factors are most strongly linked to the academics who have the highest salary aspirations.
Interesting.
Like, for example, the model shows that being male, specializing in a STEM field and focusing on research instead of teaching, those things all make it much more likely for somebody to be in that top tier of earners.
So it's giving us a more nuanced understanding of what drives those high salary expectations.
Exactly. It's not just about one factor. It's about how all these different pieces fit together.
I see.
And speaking of salary expectations, there was one statistic that jumped out at me right away.
What was that?
So men in this study reported a median desired salary of about $1,834 US,
Okay.
while women came in around $1,701.
So there's about a $130 difference there.
Yeah, pretty consistently across the board, which of course brings up the whole issue of the gender pay gap.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's a big one.
Which we see, pretty much everywhere, right?
Sadly, yeah. It's pretty ubiquitous.
It is. And it's important to remember that, we can't just assume it's the same story everywhere we go.
Right. Every context is different.
Yeah, exactly. So this study gives us a chance to really examine the gender pay gap in the specific context of Poland.
And are there any unique insights that emerge from this particular study?
Well, one thing I found interesting is that the report found this gap in desired pay between men and women seems to actually shrink as academics progress in their careers.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not a static gap. It evolves over time.
Right, which on the surface might seem like a positive thing, right?
Yeah, like maybe things are getting better for women as they gain more experience.
Exactly. But then you start thinking, well, maybe it's not quite that simple.
Yeah. What other factors could be at play?
Like, are women hitting a glass ceiling in certain fields?
That's definitely possible.
Or maybe they're feeling pressured to, prioritize family responsibilities.
Yeah, that's often a factor.
Which could end up limiting their career advancement and therefore their salary potential.
It's a complex issue with lots of moving parts.
For sure. And the report doesn't, spell it all out for us.
Right.
But it definitely raises some important questions.
Absolutely. It's prompting us to think critically about those underlying dynamics.
Yeah. And speaking of differences across fields, I was fascinated by how this report breaks down salary expectations by academic discipline.
Oh, yeah, I saw that too. There were some pretty big variations.
Yeah, like for example, in computer science, men's desired salaries are way higher than women's.
Really? How much higher are we talking?
Well, they use this thing called the Index of Relative Financial Expectations.
Okay.
And for men in computer science in Poland, it's 1.4.
So that means their salary expectations are 40% higher than women's in the same field.
Yeah, which is a pretty stark difference, especially when you think about how much the tech industry is booming in Poland right now.
You'd think that would attract more women to the field, knowing the potential earning power.
Yeah, but then you have to wonder, is this disparity maybe tied to existing gender stereotypes?
It's definitely possible that those stereotypes are shaping both men's and women's perceptions of what's achievable.
Or maybe it's a lack of female role models in those fields?
Yeah, that could be a factor too. If you don't see anyone who looks like you succeeding in a certain area, it's harder to imagine yourself doing it.
It's like we're starting to uncover these hidden layers of influence.
Right. It's not just about individual aspirations. There are systemic factors at play that shape those aspirations.
Totally. And this report even goes so far as to categorize the academics into what they call salary top dreamers and salary bottom dreamers.
What does that mean?
Basically, it's the top and bottom 10% of respondents in terms of their desired pay.
Oh, okay. So it's looking at the extreme.
Exactly. And what's really striking is that men are overrepresented among the top dreamers,
Uh-huh.
while women are more likely to be bottom dreamers.
So it's not just a difference in average expectations.
Yeah.
It's a difference in the range of aspirations, too.
Exactly. And that to me is huge.
Why is that?
Well, if women aren't even aiming as high when it comes to salary,
Yeah,
that's a problem, right?
it is. It suggests that there might be something holding them back from even envisioning those higher earning possibilities.
Right. So then the question becomes, is it a lack of confidence?
Could be.
Are they being, conditioned to think that they shouldn't ask for more?
That's definitely a possibility.
Or is it something else entirely?
It's probably a complex mix of factors.
Yeah, like you said earlier, lots of moving parts.
Exactly. From negotiation skills to societal expectations to a lack of mentorship and support. It's like a domino effect where one thing leads to another.
It's like peeling back layers of an onion.
Uh-huh. That's a great analogy.
And it's only going to get more interesting from here because this study goes beyond just the money.
Oh, really? What else do they look at?
Well, they also dig into things like job satisfaction, work-life balance, and how these academics view the Polish higher education system as a whole.
So it's a really holistic view of the academic experience.
Exactly. And there are some pretty surprising findings in those areas, too.
I can't wait to hear about them.
Well, we'll have to save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. I'm hooked.
Me too. We've only just scratched the surface.
I'm ready to go deeper.
Let's do it. Okay, so we're back, and we're ready to dig a little deeper into this report on Polish academics.
I'm ready.
We spent a lot of time last time talking about salary expectations
Right.
and that persistent gender pay gap.
Uh-huh.
But this study, it doesn't stop there.
It doesn't.
It also looks at, how satisfied these academics are with their jobs
Okay.
and kind of where they see the future of their profession heading.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Me too.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting.
How so?
Remember how we talked about those low satisfaction rates when it came to current salaries?
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of people were unhappy with what they were making.
Right. And so the study also asks academics about their perceptions of the overall, direction of change in Polish higher education.
Oh, okay. So are they optimistic about the future?
Well, that's where we see some interesting differences.
What do you mean?
So one of the questions they asked was about salary levels.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they're going to go up? Do you think they're going to stay the same?
Yeah.
And the responses varied, significantly depending on the field that the academic was in.
Huh. So different fields had different levels of optimism about future salaries.
Yeah, and get this, in some disciplines, women were actually more likely to believe that salaries were unlikely to see, big improvements.
Oh, wow. So not only are they currently earning less,
Right.
but they're also less hopeful about the future.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, is that pessimism kind of feeding into those lower salary expectations that we talked about?
Yeah, it could be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy there.
Right. If you don't think things are going to get better, why aim high?
Exactly. And on the flip side, if women are already facing those, systemic barriers and biases,
Yeah.
it's understandable that they might be less optimistic about the future.
Yeah. It's like a vicious cycle.
It is. It's a tough situation.
It is. But it also kind of highlights the importance of mentorship and support for women in academia.
Yeah, for sure.
If they're feeling disillusioned or undervalued, having someone to guide them and advocate for them could make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Mentorship can provide not just practical advice, but also a sense of community and belonging.
Right.
Can help women navigate those tricky waters and see a path forward.
Totally. Now, we've been focusing on women here, but this pessimism about salary levels,
Yeah.
is that just a female thing? Or is this a broader trend?
Well, the study does show that overall satisfaction with current salaries is pretty low across the board,
Okay.
regardless of gender.
So it's not just women.
No, it seems like there's a general sense that, academics in Poland aren't being adequately compensated
Right.
for their expertise and hard work.
And that's a big deal, right?
It is. I mean, if you're not happy with your pay, it's bound to affect other aspects of your job.
Yeah, totally. Your motivation, your productivity.
Exactly.
It could even lead to people, leaving academia altogether.
Oh, yeah. That's a real risk. The brain drain.
Right. And that's something that Poland can't afford.
No, they need to retain that talent.
They do. So this isn't just an academic issue, right?
No.
It's an economic issue.
It is. It has implications for the country as a whole.
It does.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what steps the government is taking to address these concerns.
Yeah, that's a big question.
It is. And it's a little beyond the scope of this particular study.
Right.
but it definitely highlights the need for a broader conversation, you know,
Yeah.
about the value of higher education and how to create a more sustainable and rewarding environment.
Absolutely. We need to make academia a more attractive career path.
Totally. Now, we've been talking a lot about money,
Uh-huh.
but this report, it also digs into other factors
Okay.
that influence job satisfaction,
Like what?
like work-life balance,
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
the prestige of different institutions,
Right.
things like that.
Interesting. What did they find there?
Well, the findings on work-life balance are a bit of a mixed bag.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So while a majority of academics, both men and women, report feeling stressed by their work,
Okay.
there are some variations across different age groups and disciplines.
So it's not a universal experience.
Now, it seems like some academics are finding ways to juggle those demands more effectively
Yeah.
than others.
That makes sense. I mean, everyone has different coping mechanisms and support systems.
Exactly. And this is where individual choices come into play,
Mhm.
but also institutional policies.
Right. Some universities might have better resources for managing workload or promoting work-life balance.
Yeah, totally.
Hmm.
And what about that prestige factor?
Yeah. Does working at a more prestigious institution lead to higher job satisfaction?
Well, interestingly enough, the study found that
Yeah.
while prestige might be a factor in initial job choice,
Okay.
it doesn't necessarily translate into long-term satisfaction.
Huh. So it's not a guarantee of happiness.
No, it seems like other factors,
Mm-hmm.
like research opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
supportive colleagues,
Mhm.
a sense of purpose,
Right.
those things seem to matter more in the long run.
So it's not just about the name on your CV.
Right,
It's
yeah.
about finding a place where you feel valued and where you can make a meaningful contribution.
Exactly. And that's something that, all academics, regardless of their gender or their field of study, are striving for.
Absolutely. We all want to feel like our work matters.
We do. And this report, it's giving us a lot to think about.
It is. There's so much to unpack here.
We've talked about, salary expectations, job satisfaction, work-life balance,
Yeah.
overall perceptions of Polish higher education.
It's a lot.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that, these issues are not isolated to Poland.
Right.
They reflect broader trends and challenges facing academia globally. That's a really important point.
So the insights from this Polish study,
Yeah.
they can actually help us start conversations and ask critical questions about how we can create a more equitable and sustainable future for academia as a whole.
Exactly. It's not just about Poland. It's about the bigger picture.
The challenges are real,
They are.
but so are the opportunities.
Yes. And it's by understanding these complex dynamics,
Yeah.
that we can start to envision a better
For
future
academics everywhere.
for everyone.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we're just about ready to wrap up this deep dive into Polish academia.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground here,
We have.
from those salary aspirations and those gender disparities to the search for work-life balance and a sense of purpose.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has. But before we conclude, we want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
If you could wave a magic wand
Mm-hmm.
and change one thing about the academic system in Poland,
Based on what we've discussed today.
yeah, what would it be?
That's a tough one.
It is, right?
And how would that change ripple out to affect other aspects of academic life?
Yeah, those are the big questions.
Big questions indeed.
Hold on to that thought. We'll be back in a moment to explore those big picture questions and wrap up our deep dive. All right, so we're back. And I'm still thinking about that question you posed.
Oh, yeah.
What one thing would we change about the academic system in Poland?
It's a big one.
It is.
Yeah.
It's tough to choose just one,
It is. And it's tricky because, this whole deep dive, it's shown how interconnected all these issues are, right?
Right.
Like, you try and fix one thing, and
Yeah.
it's going to have a ripple effect on everything else.
Yeah, that domino effect you were talking about.
Exactly. So where do we even begin?
Right. I mean, I guess we could start with that whole pessimism thing,
Yeah.
especially among women, about the future of salary levels.
Yeah, we can't just ignore that, right?
No, but how do we shift that mindset?
Well, it's more than just being optimistic and hoping for the best. It's
Yeah.
about creating actual concrete changes.
Okay.
Changes that show a real commitment to valuing academic work.
Like what kind of changes are we talking?
Well, things like transparent salary scales. For one,
Oh, okay.
clear promotion criteria,
Mm-hmm.
robust policies against gender discrimination.
So it's about actually putting those policies into practice?
Exactly. Actions speak louder than words, right?
They do.
Yeah.
But even if we make those structural changes,
Yeah.
won't we still need to address those underlying societal biases?
Oh, absolutely. We can't just fix the system without addressing the culture that created it.
Right, because those biases, they contribute to the gender pay gap in the first place.
Exactly. And that's where things get even more complex,
Okay.
because we need to challenge those really deeply ingrained stereotypes
About what?
about, what fields are appropriate for women,
Yeah.
what roles they should occupy,
Yeah.
even like what their salary expectations should be.
So it's like we're trying to untangle this giant knot.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
One strand at a time.
Exactly. We need to look at everything
Okay.
from early education and career guidance to mentorship opportunities and leadership representation within academia.
It's a huge undertaking.
It is. It's a multi-pronged approach.
Right. So we need to address those like systemic barriers.
Yeah.
But we also need to empower women to see themselves as deserving of equal opportunities.
Exactly. And equal compensation, of course.
So it's not just about changing the system.
Right.
It's about changing the culture.
It is. And that cultural shift, it needs to happen at all levels, from
Right.
individual attitudes
Yeah.
all the way up to institutional policies and practices.
Okay, so we've talked about the gender pay gap.
Mhm.
We've talked about promoting a more optimistic outlook.
Yeah.
What about that whole emphasis on research output
Oh, yeah, that's another big one.
as the primary measure of academic success?
We definitely need to rethink that.
How?
Well, we need to find ways to recognize and reward the full spectrum of academic contributions.
Not just publications.
Exactly. Teaching excellence, mentorship, public engagement.
Right.
These are all vital to a thriving academic ecosystem.
They are.
Yeah.
And one thing that really struck me from this report
What was that?
was how many academics, both men and women,
Yeah.
reported feeling stressed and overworked.
Yeah, that's a common theme, unfortunately.
So what if we made work-life balance a priority? Could that lead to a happier, more productive, more successful academic workforce?
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
We tend to think of work-life balance as a personal issue,
Right.
but it's really intertwined with those institutional policies and expectations.
Right.
So if universities actually prioritize well-being and create a culture that supports it, it could have a really transformative impact on the entire academic experience.
It's about investing in the whole person.
Exactly, not just the academic machine.
Right. Like imagine a system where academics feel valued,
Yeah.
supported, empowered to pursue their passions without sacrificing their personal lives.
That sounds pretty ideal.
It does, right?
Like a recipe for success.
It does. Now, achieving that vision, it might seem daunting,
It does.
but this deep dive has shown us
Yeah.
that change is possible.
It is.
And it starts by recognizing the problems,
Absolutely.
asking those tough questions,
Mm-hmm.
being willing to challenge the status quo.
That's how progress happens.
It is. And I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners,
Yeah.
whether you're in Poland, the U.S., anywhere else in the world.
The challenges facing academia are often universal,
They are.
but so are the solutions.
So what could we do?
Well, we can advocate for change.
Oh.
We can support each other.
Mm,
And we can never lose sight of the power of knowledge
Right.
and the importance of a thriving academic community.
well said.
Ah.
Well, that's a wrap on our deep dive into the world of Polish academia.
It's been a pleasure.
It has. We've uncovered some intriguing findings,
Yeah.
sparked some critical thinking,
Hopefully.
and hopefully left you with more questions than answers.
That's the beauty of a deep dive, right?
It is. It's about sparking that curiosity, encouraging exploration,
Mm-hmm.
empowering you to continue the conversation.
Exactly. The learning never stops.
It doesn't. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
And remember, stay curious.